The whip cracked through the recycled air of mining station Theta 7, its sonic boom echoing off metal walls stained with decades of human sweat and alien oversight. Maya Chen didn't flinch anymore. 3 years of backbreaking labor in the asteroid. Belt had taught her that showing pain only invited more. Faster, meat! The Zephyrian Overseer's translator box crackled with static, turning his forearm gesture into broken English. His crystalline eyes, each the size of a human fist, reflected the harsh mining lights as he towered over Maya's hunched form. The collective demands 15 tons of refined tritium today. You've given us 12. Maya's hands, raw and bleeding through her work gloves, continued to sort the precious ore. Around her, 200 other humans worked in similar silence. The lucky ones still had their names. The broken ones answered only to numbers now. But Maya Chen remembered who she was. She remembered Earth. She remembered freedom. "Overseer Krexthul," she said quietly, not looking up from her workstation. "What happens when the tritium runs out?" The alien's chittering laugh sent shivers down the spines of nearby workers. "Foolish human, the universe is infinite. There will always be more rocks to crack, more metals to mine. There will always be more of you." Something cold settled in Maya's chest. Not fear, not anymore. Something else entirely. But what if there weren't? She pressed, finally meeting those crystalline eyes. What if we just stopped? The Overseer's forearms flexed, reaching for his neural prod. But before he could activate it, the station's emergency klaxons began to wail. Red lights bathed, the mining floor in crimson shadows. All workers to containment positions. The station's AI announced in perfect, emotionless English. Incoming transmission from the collective high command. Priority Alpha. Maya exchanged glances with the woman working beside her. Sarah Martinez had been a NASA engineer before the Zephyrians found Earth. Before humanity's first contact became humanity's last free day. "This is different," Sarah whispered. "I've never seen them call a priority alpha during work shift." The massive wall screens flickered to life, showing the familiar sight of the collective's ruling council. 12 different alien species, each representing a different aspect of the galactic empire that had absorbed Earth like a drop of water into an ocean. Supreme Chancellor Vorthak of the Zephyrians stood at the center, his form imposing even through the transmission. Behind him, representatives of the Kethmori Warcast, the Elusian Mindshapers, and 9 other species that Maya had learned to hate with perfect, crystalline clarity. "Citizens of the collective," Vorthak began, his voice booming through translation matrices across 1,000 mining stations, factory worlds, and agricultural colonies. "Today marks the 5th anniversary of humanity's integration into our great civilization." Maya's hands clenched into fists. "To commemorate this occasion, we announce the next phase of human utilization. Genetic analysis has revealed that your species possesses unique biological markers that make you ideal for hazardous environment operations. Congratulations, humans. You will be the first species to begin deep void mining operations in the Maelstrom sector." Sarah's face went pale. Maya had heard whispers about the Maelstrom sector. Ships went in. Ships didn't come out. "Furthermore," the Chancellor continued, "to ensure optimal productivity, all human breeding programs will now be managed directly by the collective. Mate selection, offspring distribution, and genetic modification protocols will be implemented within the lunar cycle." The words hit Maya like a physical blow. They weren't just slaves anymore. They were breeding stock. Transport ships will begin collecting human workers for deep void operations in 72 hours. That is all. The transmission cut. For a moment, the mining station fell into absolute silence. Then, slowly, Maya stood up from her workstation. "No," she said quietly. Overseer Krexthul's translator crackled. "Return to work positions, humans. The announcement changes nothing about today's quotas." "No," Maya repeated, louder this time. Around her, other workers began to look up. Sarah Martinez straightened. An old man named Tom Bradley, who claimed to have been a demolitions expert before the invasion, slowly set down his sorting tools. "I said return to "We heard what you said," Maya interrupted, her voice cutting through the recycled air like a blade. "And we said no." The overseer's forearms reached for his weapons, but he hesitated. In 3 years, no human had ever refused. A direct order. The neural conditioning was supposed to make it impossible. Maya took a step forward. "You know what the difference is between a slave and a free person, Krexthul?" she asked, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent mining floor. "A slave believes they have no choice. A free person makes one anyway." She reached for her mining laser. The beam cut through the overseer's torso before he could scream as his crystalline blood pooled on the metal deck plating. Maya turned to face her fellow humans. 200 pairs of eyes stared back at her, wide with shock and something else. "Hope. My name is Maya Chen," she announced. "I was born on Earth. I lived free for 23 years before they came. And I will die free, even if it has to be. Today." She raised the mining laser above her head. "Who's with me?" The silence stretched for exactly 3 heartbeats. Then Sarah Martinez picked up her own laser. "Sarah Martinez, NASA mission specialist. I helped design the engines that would have taken us to the stars." Tom Bradley hefted a plasma cutter with practiced ease. "Tom Bradley, former Staff Sergeant, Marine Corps Demolitions. I know how to bring down buildings, bridges, and apparently, space stations." One by one, hands reached for tools. Voices called out names that hadn't been spoken in years. The neural conditioning, it seemed, had never touched the part of the human spirit that simply refused to break. Within minutes, every human on mining station Theta 7 was armed. Within an hour, the station's Zephyrian overseers were dead. Within 6 hours, Maya Chen had done something the collective hadn't thought possible. She had started a revolution. But as she stood in the station's command center, watching the distant lights of the collective's response fleet growing larger through the viewports, she knew this was only the beginning. The real war was about to start. Chapter 2. The Awakening, the first collective warship to reach mining station Theta 7, sent the standard surrender demand. Maya answered by launching the station's entire supply of mining charges directly into the ship's engine core. The explosion lit up the asteroid belt like a newborn star. "Message received," she muttered, watching debris scatter across the void. Behind her, the station's improvised command center buzzed with activity. Tom Bradley hunched over a jury-rigged communications array, his weathered hands dancing across controls that had never been designed for human use. Sarah Martinez worked frantically at a holographic display, her engineering background finally put to use for something other than mining quotas. "Maya!" Tom's voice cut through the chatter. "You need to hear this." She rushed to his station as crackling transmissions filled the air, voices in accented English speaking rapidly across subspace channels that should have been locked to human access. "Beta Colony has secured the mining platforms. 7 overseers down, no human casualties. Need ammunition? We've got 3 more ships incoming." Maya's heart raced. "How many stations?" Tom's grin split his grizzled face. 15 and counting. Words spreading faster than they can contain it. Turns out humans are real good at talking to each other when nobody's watching. On the main display, Sarah pulled up a tactical overview of local space. Red dots marked collective fleet positions. Blue dots showed human-controlled facilities. And scattered throughout the asteroid belt, dozens of yellow dots indicated facilities where the situation was unclear. "We've got maybe 6 hours before they bring in the heavy ships," Sarah reported. "The ones designed to crack planets, not just mine them." Maya studied the display. In 6 hours they could maybe take a few more mining stations, maybe free a few thousand more humans, but then the collective would glass them all from orbit, and that would be the end of humanity's last stand. Unless... "Sarah, what do you know about the collective's infrastructure?" The engineer's eyes lit up with understanding. "You're thinking about the Nexus stations," Maya nodded. The Nexus stations were the collective's pride and joy. Massive space habitats that served as administrative and cultural centers for their empire. Each one housed millions of aliens from dozens of species, connected by faster-than-light communication networks that kept their civilization running smoothly. They were also completely undefended. After all, who would be crazy enough to attack? A Nexus station? The very idea was unthinkable. The Collective had ruled the galaxy for over 2,000 years. Rebellion simply didn't happen on that scale. "Tom," Maya called, "can you patch me through to all the human stations?" "Already on it. Every time we send a reconnaissance mission to human-controlled space, the ships either don't return or—" She gestured at a datapad. "Or they defect." The Supreme Chancellor stared at her. "They what?" "Defect, sir. Join the human coalition. We've lost 17 ships this way, including 2 heavy cruisers and their entire crews. The humans appear to be very persuasive." Across the galaxy, in a converted asteroid mining station that now served as humanity's unofficial capital, Maya Chen was indeed being persuasive. "The way I see it," she said, addressing the crowded assembly hall, "you have 2 choices. You can keep living the way you've been living, taking orders, following protocols, hoping that if you're good enough slaves, they'll treat you a little better." The audience was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Humans sat beside fur-covered Yethians. Crystalline Zephyrians argued quietly with methane-breathing Corvani. A dozen other species filled the makeshift seats, all listening to a human woman who had somehow become the voice of galactic revolution. "Or," Maya continued, "you can remember what it feels like to make your own choices." A Yethian delegation leader raised a clawed hand. "Speaker Chen, my people have served the Collective for 800 years. We have prospered under their guidance. Why should we risk everything for uncertainty?" Maya nodded respectfully. She had learned over the past months that revolution required more than rage. It required hope. And hope required honesty, because prosperity built on someone else's choices isn't prosperity at all. It's just a comfortable cage. She gestured to the viewports where the stars of the outer rim gleamed like scattered diamonds. "Your people were explorers once. You had art, music, stories that were uniquely yours. When was the last time a Yethian wrote a song that wasn't approved by the Collective's cultural ministry?" The delegation leader's ears flattened against his skull. Maya could see the moment when her words hit home. In the months since Cathera, Maya had learned to read the expressions of a dozen different species. She had learned their histories, their cultures, their dreams. And she had learned that every species in the Collective had given up something precious in exchange for security. The question was whether they remembered what that something was. "I won't lie to you," Maya continued. "If you join us, some of you will die. Maybe all of you. The Collective has ships, weapons, and resources we can't match. But they don't have what we have." "And what is that?" asked a Corvani engineer, his voice bubbling through his methane-breathing apparatus. Maya smiled. "They don't have a choice. They built their entire civilization on the assumption that rebellion is impossible, that conquered species stay conquered. That order, once established, is permanent." She gestured to the assembly around her, dozens of species that had never worked together, never even communicated as equals, now planning the overthrow of a 2,000-year-old empire. We're proof that they were wrong. The debate continued for hours. In the end, the vote wasn't even close. The Outer Rim Coalition was born with the signatures of 43 different species, all agreeing to fight for something they had almost forgotten existed. Freedom. But even as they celebrated, Maya knew that time was running out. The Collective wouldn't tolerate this challenge much longer. Soon they would bring their full military might to bear on the Outer Rim. Soon, the real war would begin. And humanity, the species that had been written off as simple slave labor, would stand at the center of the galaxy's greatest conflict. 3 days later, Maya stood in the Coalition's newly constructed war room, staring at sensor displays that showed the largest fleet in galactic history bearing down on their position. "How many?" she asked Sarah Martinez, who had become their de facto military strategist. 2,000 ships, Sarah replied grimly, including 12 planet killers. "They're not planning to capture us, Maya. They're planning to sterilize every world in the Outer Rim. Maya nodded. She had expected this. Send the signal, she ordered, across the galaxy in star systems that the collective had controlled for centuries, hidden transmitters activated. Maya's voice, recorded weeks earlier, began broadcasting on every frequency in every language to every world where sentient beings lived under collective rule. My name is Maya Chen, the message began. I am a human being. I was born free, lived as a slave, and I will die free. Today the collective sends its fleets to destroy us. They want to make an example of what happens when people remember how to say no. On 10,000 worlds, beings who had never heard of humans stopped what they were doing and listened. They will probably succeed. We are outnumbered, outgunned, and outmatched. But we are not outmatched in the thing that matters most. We remember what freedom feels like, and we're willing to die for it. The message continued for exactly 3 minutes. It ended with coordinates, not to the Outer Rim, but to collective military installations throughout the galaxy. If you're listening to this, Maya's voice concluded, then you have the same choice we had. You can live on your knees or die on your feet. Either way, make it count. The transmission ended. For exactly 17 seconds, the galaxy was quiet. Then, on a mining world in the Vega system, a Zephyrian shift supervisor named Kethril Mar put down his neural prod and walked out of the facility. When his overseers demanded he return to work, he looked them in their crystalline eyes and said no. On an agricultural colony orbiting Procyon, an entire species of methane farmers called the Volanti stopped harvesting the crops that fed half the galaxy. On the industrial worlds of Altair, machines went silent as their operators simply left. Within 6 hours of Maya's transmission, the collective was facing the largest coordinated uprising in galactic history, and at the center of it all, a human woman who had once sorted ore on a mining station, prepared to make her final stand against an empire that had ruled the stars for 2 millennia. The collective fleet entered the Outer Rim like a wave of metal and fire, ready to end the rebellion once and for all. They had no idea that the rebellion had already ended. It had become a revolution. Chapter 4. The Legacy Burns. The Battle of the Outer Rim lasted exactly 47 minutes. Maya Chen watched from the bridge of the Coalition flagship Defiance, a captured collective battlecruiser that had been retrofitted with weapon systems designed by 17 different species working together for the first time in galactic history. Around her, the largest space battle in recorded history unfolded in silent fury. 2,000 collective ships faced off against a hodgepodge fleet of barely 300 vessels, crewed by species that had been enemies, slaves, or strangers just months before. It should have been a massacre. It was. Just not the kind the collective had expected. "Ma'am," called out Kethril Mar, the Zephyrian who had become Maya's unlikely communications officer. "We're receiving surrender requests from 17 collective ships. Their crews are requesting permission to defect." Maya smiled grimly. Even here, even now, the revolution continued to spread. "Grant it. Send them coordinates for refugee processing." On the tactical display, the battle raged with impossible fury. Coalition ships, outnumbered 6-1, darted between the massive collective dreadnoughts like wolves attacking a herd of elephants. They were smaller, faster, and crewed by beings who had absolutely nothing left to lose. More importantly, they were fighting for something the collective had forgotten how to understand. Maya. Sarah Martinez's voice crackled over the comm from the engine room. "The collective flagship is moving to engage us directly. I think they want to take you alive." Maya looked at the massive vessel bearing down on them. The Eternal Order, Supreme Chancellor Vorthak's personal command ship. It was larger than most space stations, bristling with weapons that could crack moons and protected by shields that had never been penetrated in 2,000 years of collective dominance. "All ships," Maya announced over the fleet communications. "Network, this is Chen. Execute Protocol 7. Around the battlefield, coalition ships began to move in a pattern that defied every rule of space combat. Instead of maintaining formation, they scattered like seeds on the wind. Instead of engaging the enemy fleet directly, they began ramming individual ships at maximum velocity. It was suicide. It was also devastatingly effective. Impossible, breathed General Kethmori as she watched the tactical display from the bridge of the Eternal Order. They're destroying themselves just to take out single ships. It's madness. Supreme Chancellor Vorthak said nothing. He was beginning to understand something that terrified him more than the loss of ships or territory. Humans didn't fight wars the way civilized species did. They fought them the way predators did, without rules, without limits, without any concept of acceptable losses. "Sir," the communications officer reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the human flagship." But that was the future. In the present, in the wreckage of the Outer Rim, there was only silence and the slow drift of debris from ships crewed by beings who had chosen to die free rather than live as slaves. Maya Chen was gone. Most of her followers were gone. The Great Rebellion had been crushed, and yet somehow they had won. Not the battle, not the war, but something more important. They had won the right to be remembered as beings who refused to kneel. In the end, perhaps that was enough. Epilogue. The Long Echo 1. 100 years after the Battle of the Outer Rim, a young Zephyrian named Kithara stood in the Museum of Liberation on the independent world of New Harmony. The museum had been built from the recovered hull of Maya Chen's flagship, the Defiance, and it drew visitors from across what had once been collective space. Kithara's crystalline eyes reflected the light from the memorial wall. 10,000 names inscribed in the languages of 43 different species, all beings who had died in the final battle of the human rebellion. "Grandmother," she asked the elderly Zephyrian beside her, "did you really know them?" Kethriel Mar, now ancient, by the standards of her species, nodded slowly. Her once brilliant carapace had dulled with age, but her eyes still held the fire that had burned in those desperate months when the galaxy learned what freedom meant. "I knew Maya Chen," she said quietly. "I was her communications officer. I was there when she made her final transmission." "What was she like?" Kethriel Mar considered the question seriously. Around them, beings from dozens of species moved through the museum quietly, reverently. Many were young, too young to remember the collective, too young to understand what life had been like when every choice was made by someone else. "She was terrifying," Kethriel Mar said finally. "Not because she was violent, though she could be. Not because she was angry, though she had every right to be. She was terrifying because she made you remember what you had given up, what we had all given up." On the wall beside them, a holographic display showed the final moments of the Battle of the Outer Rim. Maya Chen's face streaked with blood and smoke, delivering her last message to the universe. "The collective told us that security was worth more than freedom," Kethriel Mar continued. "That comfort was worth more than choice. That peace was worth more than dignity." Maya Chen looked at that equation and said, "No, it isn't." Young Kithara studied the display, trying to understand what it must have been like to live in a universe where one species made all the decisions for everyone else. Did she know she was going to die? "Oh yes," Kethriel Mar said. "She knew from the beginning. The humans all did. That was what made them so dangerous. They weren't fighting to win. They were fighting to be remembered." The old Zephyrian gestured to the museum around them, to the visitors from 100 different worlds, to the children learning about the price of freedom. And they succeeded. As they prepared to leave, Kithara paused at the memorial wall. Her young eyes traced the names of beings who had died for the right to make their own choices. Humans, yes, but also Zephyrians like her grandmother. Yethians who had given up comfortable lives. Corvani who had left their safe methane colonies. Dozens of species who had learned from a group of escaped slaves that freedom was worth dying for. "Grandmother," she said quietly, "would you do it again, if you had the choice?" Kethrelmar smiled, and for a moment the fire in her eyes burned as bright as it had a century ago. "Child," she said, "every day I wake up free is the day I make that choice all over again." They walked out into the sunlight of New Harmony, where beings from across the galaxy lived, worked, and dreamed together by choice rather than by command. In the distance, ships lifted off from the spaceport, ships crewed by free beings traveling to free worlds, carrying with them the idea that had burned through the galaxy like wildfire, the idea that no one, no matter how powerful, had the right to make choices for someone else, the idea that freedom was worth any price, the idea that when you push people far enough, they don't break, they burn. And sometimes, if you're very unlucky, they burn everything you built to the ground. Maya Chen had been dead for a century, but her legacy lived on in every free choice made by every free being, in what had once been the collective's empire. They had called humans slaves, and humans had responded by teaching the galaxy how to be free. In the end, perhaps that was the greatest victory of all. The revolution was over,